Just a reminder that any thoughts, opinions, and points of views expressed during this podcast are those of the individual and not of the Grand Lodge, appendant body, or concordant body that individual may belong.
Welcome to this episode of Pen and Compass. We have a great guy on here with us tonight. He is a OG when it comes to being a podcaster. He loves everything that's literary. He's an avid reader. He's involved in a lot of different parts of Freemasonry, invitational things. He and I first met a couple 3 years ago at the good old Masonic Week, and started building our friendship from there. I hope he considers me a friend. But we've got RJ Robert Johnson with us tonight from Whence Came You podcast and Masonic Roundtable and a couple other things. So welcome. Thank you for giving us this privilege to talk to you and get to know you a little bit better, Robert.
The thanks is all to you, fellas. I think what you guys have started here is incredible. Really like what you've done with the format in the last couple episodes, this first couple episodes rather, and it's a tremendous opportunity to, get on and share some fellowship with you all and talk about what you guys are doing and anything else. So good times. I really
Well,
appreciate the time.
you are one of those people that we saw what you were doing and we liked it, and so we're not trying to be you, but we took your lead, and we hope that we are
It's
something
yeah,
that you're enjoying just as much as we enjoy doing it.
we've all been inspired in some way, right? And if we
Yeah.
like, it was that Isaac Newton quote, right? If we've seen any further than anybody, it's from standing on the shoulders of giants. So yeah,
Ecclesiastes 12. There's nothing new under the sun.
that's right.
Or all of Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. So yeah. So getting right into it. What do you think kind of defines you as a podcaster? That's the way I think of you. I know you have other aspects and things that you're doing creatively, but where did that kind of happen? And how do you think about yourself in that way?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, it's interesting, but also at the same time, it's nothing was intentional, right? It's like accidental success, which sometimes happens, and it's awesome. Um, it all started because I was listening to an amazing podcast, and it was called The Digital Freemason. And The Digital Freemason, it was by Scott Blaskin, who is out of Canada. And you can still go to his website today. I believe there are still, he's still making awesome content. Um, thedigitalfreemason.com. And basically, Scott was the first person to offer Masonic education in a way and on topics that I was looking for when I joined Masonry. That's what I wanted. And I didn't really get it from my mother lodge because, as many lodges exist today, are symbolic, are blue lodges, first 3 degrees kind of thing. Um, they don't always focus on those things because there are other things they view more important, like just trying to survive, right? They're holding charity events for the lodge or whatever else, and any number of other things. And so they don't focus on the education. And it was just a shortcoming, nobody's fault, except I was still looking for it. So I would find myself listening to uh, Scott do his podcast. Uh, and I would listen to all his episodes, and he would just read these short educational papers. And Scott was so inspirational, and I loved what he did. And in fact, when I wanted to start doing a podcast, I wrote him an email. Um, I don't know if he'll hear this and if he does, if he ever got the email, but I was like, I love what you do. I'm just trying to like add some additional resources and do something similar. I want to read Masonic articles and longer papers and things and give some more context and have, guests on and do all of these other things. And that's what I did. And I bought a $100 podcast kit off of Amazon from Behringer. Um, and for many years, that's all I used. And my setup today is not too dissimilar from what I started with. Um, and I put together the first couple episodes, which was me just reading some papers off of MasonicWorld.com. If you guys have ever been there, Masonic World has a bunch of articles. Some of them are MSA, some of them are just, addresses on masonry or whatever. And the first episode I read was Freemasonry, secret or not secret. And then I would release an episode, I don't know, every couple weeks or something. And then we had this tremendous storm, like in 2008 or 9 up in the Illinois area. And it knocked our power out for 4 days, which meant I didn't get a podcast out. And I had opened up my phone and saw an email come through from a trucker, a Mason, who was like, "Hey, man, there's no episode out this week. What's up?" And I was like,
He's
oh,
like, feed me, feed me, feed me. He's like, I'm starving over here.
this was it, right? And the reason is not because like anybody was not providing education for him, but he was a trucker who's on the road like all the time and never gets to go to lodge. So in his words, he said something like, listening to this podcast or podcasts like it, he felt like he was back in lodge or he was being a Mason again, right? Not necessarily being able to participate in a lodge function, but still somehow being exposed to Masonic teachings and having some sort of, Masonic thing in his life at that point. So, and every time I want to like say, I think I'm going to stop doing the podcast, or I think we're going to cut back to maybe one podcast a month or do anything like that, my wife is like the first one who like pops up and she's like, "You remember that trucker?" She's like, "Where there's one, there's 1,000." I was like, "Yeah, you're right." Okay. So like, and to this point, I think we've read something like 2,030 papers on the show over 11 years. So it's been incredible. And I think that's kind of what solidifies it as a podcast, and that it has always been, this last year has been very difficult, but prior to this year, I mean, an episode came out every single Sunday night at 9:30 p.m., ready for you to listen to on Monday morning without, any interruption. And that sort of, um, I don't know, you call it dedication or you call it consistency, whatever, you know, allows you to be there for those who need it every week or whatever the case is. And, people listen for a year, then they stop listening and they come back like 3 years later or whatever the case is. And they find out you're still doing these things. And it kind of solidifies you, um, in a weird, like, I guess, internet forever place is, a podcaster on Freemasonry. And it's been a joy to do. It's afforded me, or it's allowed me to, have fellowship and to travel around the world, because they're like, "Oh, RJ does this podcast. He reads all this stuff and he's an informed person. He must also be able to present really well." Well, I think that might be, wishful thinking on some people's part.
They don't
You
remember that you can edit out
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recordings.
So,
It's a
so,
little bit different live in front of everybody with
mhm,
the screen behind you. Yeah.
exactly. But, I do my best. I get out there, and over the years, it's been really great because people have, um, as all brothers do, we kind of build each other up. And, my end of my live presentations or whatever, I always put a little link up on there for um, an anonymous survey. It says, "Hey, tell me how I did so I can learn to get better." And I know that these are my brothers being constructive for me. So I'm not taking anything, poorly or anything. But yeah, that's kind of how it started, and
Feedback
really
is a
what's
gift.
gotten me.
Feedback is a
It
gift. It
always.
really is. And you've gotta, man, it's your ego has to be shaped. I mean, it literally. I think all three of us are master masons, and we understand those working tools of the mallet and the chisel. And you have to use that also on your ego.
Yeah.
You have to use that on your ego, and so you did a great job high level. this is where this is where Whence Came You came from. This is how it kind of manifested in things. And by the way, we'll throw a little thing in here. This is a happy accident also, Pen and Compass. We have a bunch of other stuff that we've already kind of thought about and have outlines and lists for and episodes and topics, and just couldn't get the right set of people together. And so Rodney and I interviewed Patrick, and he's like, okay, what are we going to call this? So we're going to throw this over in this one of these other themes, or one of these other structures. And I'm like, no, I'll just think about it. Just give me about 5 minutes. And so we came up with the name, and we came up with the kind of everything from there. It's been the one thing that's been scalable for us. So we're always trying to get 3 people together at least to do these. So but anyway, enough about us. What could you break down kind of for me whence came you, what you're trying to do there from the podcast, and then kind of you have a little fiefdom there, a little empire of a production company that surrounds that media company, whatever, however you like to phrase that, and I think that's a really different thing that you're doing, not just this one-off TikTok account, or you're really seeing it kind of in a holistic manner.
Yeah, it's always been about WCY Media is a parent company that I started as an umbrella to sort of protect it's an LLC, right? We have to be realistic in that this is today's world and things are crazy. So you had to have some legal protections. You can take everything you want from the podcast, but I don't want my family at any point to be negatively affected monetarily or financially by anything that happens with that stuff. So yeah, it started off as just kind of legal protection, but also what it's been able to do is to sort of become an umbrella under which we have started a lot of different things and projects that we, because of their association and under the umbrella, have been sort of protected as well. And that protection gives us a couple things: is legitimacy, which is something else that is very important to Freemasons. There's so much baloney out on the internet, and even in the printed page. We don't know necessarily what to believe in and what not to. And so the way we get this information today really is kind of word of mouth and what people see you do, what other Masons see you and know the kind of man and the things that you're into, presenting at lodges, or maybe they see you at Masonic Week, whatever the case is. We know they're like, oh, well, actually, he's a good guy. We know that guy. Yeah, we can recommend him. He's good to go. He's a legit Mason. He talks about real topics, historical, esoteric, whatever have you. And you can take what he says to the bank. So the legitimacy of Masonic information is one thing that I think is super important, because you've got a number of people out there, especially today, TikTok and things, who are out there that make some very interesting claims, right? Regardless of what they may be about. But we can certainly say, I think in this crowd, if I were to, talk to Rodney and Jeff and, anybody listening probably is a, more of a esoteric sort of bent brother. And even if you're not, no judgment. But I could probably talk to you guys pretty plainly and not get an eyebrow raised if I said some certain things, right? But even us, as we've probably heard everything under the sun, there are some people out there on TikTok or whatever that will say certain things and we go, whoa, buddy. And this guy we know is a legit Mason. And it has taken time, but those people have been brought up on, Masonic charges and removed from the fraternity because of the kind of negative attention they're bringing the fraternity. So legitimacy is something else that we want to bring to this. And that comes with, a lot of people think, well, does that mean you have to get Grand Lodge buy-in? Nope. No, I've never involved Grand Lodge in anything except for at one point, I think back in 2011, I was doing something called Grand Lodge Spotlight, which is where I was going to the different Grand Lodge websites and looking for a cool program that they do and wanted to talk about it and direct people listening to go to their website and check it out, right? And I would let Grand Lodges know. And there was one Grand Lodge who basically had a freak out and said, "Well, are you allowed to do this? And does your Grand Master know you're doing this?" And I was like, "Oh man, what did I get myself into?" Uh, and so, of course, I went to my Grand Master and I said, "Hey, this is what's going on. Is this a thing that I need to like come get your, blessing to do this?" He's like, "No, you're a free man. You do whatever you want to do." And he said, "I listened to the last couple episodes, and from what I hear, I think everything's fine, perfect, good to go. I can't give you blanket coverage for the future because who knows what happens in the future with you, right? But for right now, I think everything's fine." And that was kind of an eye-opening moment to me, that this sort of idea of being legitimate in the eyes of brothers is a real thing. But you know what else is a real thing, guys, is being a legitimate thing in the face of, it doesn't matter what your fellow brothers think from across the nation or the globe. Grand lodges might still think, you're a pain in the butt for anything you might be talking about or whatever. So it's important to always, maintain a good relationship with your grand lodges. Again, going back to the legitimacy of what you're putting out there, and always kind of trying to be as altruistic as possible. We run WCY Media as an LLC, and underneath that is the Whence Came You podcast. And then we've got, right, Masonic Instruction, which is, yeah, so that's a speakers bureau, right? A global speakers bureau that we put out there. We vet all of the speakers, and you can go to masonicinstruction.com and you can find a speaker to come out to your lodge. And I
Or
don't,
fly them across the country, or have
that's
them
right.
travel 3 states over and help them out. And yeah, there's all
Yeah,
kinds of ways to do that.
the idea there was, again, it's a service. So the tagline on the site is a service to the craft, and this is essentially our way of giving back, right? So um, you know, anything we can do is all about trying to give back, because that mission for at least Whence Came You has always been to provide education for Masons who are interested in furthering their knowledge of Freemasonry, and as Albert Mackey may have put it, and its kindred sciences, and also provide information that the non-Mason and Mason alike can go to as a trusted source for something. And what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to say something that I consider definitive, right? But if there's something up in the air, I'm the kind of person who says, well, this Grand Lodge says this Grand Lodge says this. We have to acknowledge the nuances here, and we talk about those things open and honestly. Intellectual honesty is something that we hold very high. We're not ever trying to, push any particular agenda, which is really important today, especially in Freemasonry, where we have seen over the last couple of years some intense disagreements and upsets in Grand Lodge lines across the nation and world, where um, potentially somebody of Jeff's or Rodney or my, several of our, I guess, cohorts in Masonry on a educational level across the nation could essentially tweet something and change the outcome of a vote. You like it or not, Jeff, Rodney, myself, the guys from TMR, Old Fashioned, all those guys, they're all influencers in a niche category of a population on this earth as Masons, right? So we have a duty to be as honest and open as we can. And so that's really what we've built everything on, and that's what we try to do.
Well, we're hoping to hit some of the same goals here. Just we just want to have people on and have very interesting conversations. And what goes on in larger groups of Freemasons at the grand level, state levels. I mean, those things are there, and I don't really seeing taking the time whenever there are 7 or 8 I can think off the top of my head sources that are already doing that. So this is more about literary art, and eventually visual art. And then there's another podcast that we're working on. As I see your guitar in the back, you may be a double guest. We're working on one that's based on Masons who like music. So we're trying to do things very kind of segmented in that. But no, it's been great, and you have done these things, and I like it the way you've things that you're interested in, things that you want to study more. You've kind of taken the Masonic concept and things within Whence Came You, and then said, hey, this is something kind of like you said, that kindred science, or this base of knowledge that we know now that they didn't know in the 17, 18, 1600s, whenever these rituals were being written. And now we see this in actual science today. It's not this
Yeah.
primitive.
Yeah, it's been really wild to be able to. I mean, we've done entire, I guess we'd call it larger story arcs within the podcast, where we've done a year of a tarot segment, at the end of a podcast. And again, sticking with intellectual honesty, before every single segment, we have to say things like, "Hey, tarot is not Freemasonry. So if this doesn't tickle your fancy, you can." Fast forward, stop the podcast now. No harm, no foul. Um, but here's how I use it, right? And so, like, it's kindred or tangential arts. And we've done other arcs, where we talk about astrology and astronomy and the separation that they eventually happened and the relation to masonry. We've talked about, you know, the idea of any of the seven liberal arts and sciences are essentially Masonic. And that means from time to time, I will go to science news websites and pull things that may be of interest to Masons, the origin of languages, or some archaeological dig that pushes uh, the dating structure for humans on North American continent back 3,000 more years. I mean, all that stuff is super important. Our second degree in Masonry calls us out to study the seven liberal arts and sciences, which, to be fair, at that time, contextually speaking, that nexus, those were the largest scope of what could be known. These were the mysteries of everything contained within those seven arts. And today, obviously, we've expanded, and there's all kinds of things people can study today. But I think, never forgetting that you're not locked into just the arcane in those seven liberal arts and sciences. We are enabled and encouraged to go beyond. And so, talking about modern day things that happen within that scope is also a good idea from time to time. Considering its appropriateness.
Yeah. Well, we're going to bring on Rodney later, but he and we have a lot of great discussions, I think, about natural law and kind of how things, there is a great architect of the universe and how he has appointed things that we don't really understand and we're probably never going to understand. But it's beautiful to see them be there, nature, and and trying to be close to that. And I think that's a kind of there's a practice in that too, right? There's a whatever you want to call it, label it, but there's some esoterics in that you're sitting there and you're looking deeper into something outside of you that you appreciate that connects you back to divineness. So, well, I think that I may ask you some more questions about the podcast, but what is your vision? Because I almost have like a migraine, and I don't have migraines whenever people start telling me what education and how they define it in the Masonic sense. I think if you go ask, what is the old joke? If you go ask 11 past masters, what's education, you're going to get 42 different answers. Something like that. Everybody's got, it's just like ears and noses and stuff like that. So what would you kind of say is your vision within this kind of realm of education, Masonic education, and kind of how would you define that and framework that and structure it?
Yeah, this is interesting because I think at a point you come to a realization as a Mason that Freemasonry itself does not own its own philosophy. It is a an amalgamation, a compilation, a greatest hits album, if you want to call it, of philosophy. And sure, it aligns to certain modicums like really well. It doesn't mean that they are those things, like Stoicism in Masonry, or like, gosh, I mean, they seem so similar. Neoplatonism and Freemasonry, wow, seems so similar. Kabbalah, right? Like all of these things kind of find their way. And yet, if you ask, like you said, if you ask a Mason what education is, the Grand Master will tell you all the time, well, Freemasonry is many things to many people. And at a point in my life, I thought that was so sad and misguided, because I thought, Masonry is one thing. And if you think it's anything else, you shouldn't be in it. And that was my thought for a long time. And it's very, kind of controversial.
You've kind of tempered that since then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I have tempered that. And I think the reason I've tempered that is I was speaking with a good friend of mine, Greg Kaminsky, at one point.
Yeah, I've watched his stuff. His great YouTube guy. Wow.
Yeah, he is amongst the smartest folks that I think I know. Maybe I could probably say is maybe, one of the smartest people alive today. He, I mean, like legit, academically, he is very smart, but also in an esoteric and sort of spiritual, philosophical way. He, I don't think he would call himself a guru ever, because he's not like an egoist that way. But he is to a lot of people somebody to look to. And one day we were actually on a bus. We were sitting right next to each other. I remember it being kind of cold, and he and I were talking about. At first, we were talking about UFOs, um, and some sightings that we had had. Anyway, so we're sitting there talking, and I started complaining about this very same thing. Masonry should be one thing, and if it's not that one thing to you, well, Jeff, then you need to just demit, because it's not, about crushing cans to raise money for a scholarship for the local high school and 7-minute business meetings once a month. That's not what this is. Right. And I asked Greg, I said this to Greg, and I said, how can I get through this? And Greg said, I think you need to, is such a simple, stupid answer. But he said, you need to be okay with Masonry the way it is. And it really took me aback a little bit, because I was like, well, damn it, Greg, you're not giving me what I want. That's not the answer I'm looking for. I want the magic, like, you tell me how I can how I can get rid of these people. I don't want to deal with these people anymore. And that's not what I got.
Yeah, you're supposed to be validating. You're supposed to be validating what I just said to you.
Yeah,
come on, man.
So,
get with the program.
So Greg said that to me, and we kind of talked about some other stuff. And that night, I'm laying there in a hotel room, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, what does that even mean? And it took some time to really settle in. But for me, it is kind of acknowledging that Masonry is many things to many different people, but there's value in that, right? And that value is not something, I mean, we can talk about it, but I don't really want to get into it. It would just be a long tangent. But like, if Masonry is a force for good in the world, and if some belief, practice, philosophy, or religion, regardless of how factual or historically erroneous it may be, is practiced by an individual who is a Mason, and it lets that person feel good and allows them to do good works that benefit humanity, then I kind of just thought, well, that's fine then. Like, they're going to find their own way. And if they don't want to study Neoplatonism as the foundation and Stoicism as their foundation for everything they do in Masonry or whatever, not saying that's what I do, just, as an example, then that's okay. And so with that, I would say that that mission is been amplified through the podcast. Like in the beginning, I was very objectivist, even though I had my own opinions, right? I didn't want to editorialize. I didn't put a podcast together to say this is the way it is. I put a podcast together to present as objectively as possible educational pieces, whether I believed in them or not. And then later on, as I discovered sort of the error of my thinking, I did start to talk about the error of my thinking and why I think the way I think now, which I think is a safer way to do it, right? Because I can acknowledge now that I was misguided in my thinking, and I can acknowledge now that through that and coming to that realization, I actually kind of land back to where, most Masons lie, which is it's many things to many people. But the difference is we know why that's important, right? Like we've taken it that extra step level, peeled back that extra layer of onion. And, so what is Masonic education? I'll tell you the one thing I'll stand as a fact. I don't think Masonic education is ritual instruction. Other than that,
No, that's ritual instruction.
exactly.
Right. That's not.
And so this, one of the things that
saying all
bothers
the words
me,
the right way and in the right spot on a piece of carpet is not education. And I will say that.
yeah, maybe Rodney or Jeff, maybe you guys have come across this, but Grand Lodges they'll refer to something and they'll call it the esoteric work.
Yeah.
And the esoteric work is apparently the ritual. And I'm like, what? Just that's the ritual. I wouldn't call that the esoteric work. I mean, it is esoteric.
That's where all the symbols, themes, the settings, the literature is captured.
Yeah.
But that's not esoterics. That's just
It's just the
body
way,
of work. It's a body of work. It's not.
So yeah, I think that's really my stance. And the stance is that anything, honestly, can be Masonic education if framed correctly and given the opportunity to address why that topic matters to Masons, right? Like I've given presentations before on the several different, in fact, I'll give this is the presentation I'll give for the conference, right? Is
down in the San Antonio Esoteric Summit, June 7th, 2025, when you're with us. Esoterics 101 is what
yeah.
This
this presentation I gave for a sort of I wouldn't say sort of a prestigious lodge out in Indiana, and I had the master of the lodge ask me before I gave the presentation. He said, "I like it, and I just know that I need to ask this question: why does this matter to a Mason today?" And so I had to add like a 5-minute thing to the end of the presentation to talk about that. Why the quote unquote esoteric teachings, the mystery schools, as it were, the philosophies of those organizations, those societies and groups, why does that stuff matter to the modern man or woman for that matter? And that's the framing, that's the context, that's the why. And that is really important. So if you're out there today and anybody is listening and you think you've got some baller presentation on esoteric thing that's like, is guaranteed to blow some minds, just be ready, because your worst enemy and also as Jeff pointed out earlier, feedback is a gift. Your worst enemy is going to ask the best question you've ever heard, even though you won't appreciate it. And they'll say, so what? It doesn't matter what you tell them. You could be like, so what? Why do I care?
Yeah.
You got to be ready for that.
And so a lot that's almost like universally been brought up in these conversations. And about this point, it seems kind of funny how there's it's like
Serendipity.
And so for me, I just will say it on this episode like I have on the other ones. Um, let those who have ears hear, let those who have eyes see, and let those that have a mind and a heart and a soul that want to believe or want to gather knowledge seek and find. And I mean that's kind of like you can't do anything other than that. And that's kind of the vibe that Jesus gives in the parables. He's kind of like, this is not for everybody. Not everybody's going to understand this.
Yeah, what's the
I'm doing it for those, the house of the faithful kind of thing.
cast not your pearls before swine kind of thing, right?
Right.
Here's
Yeah.
my thing is I'll cast my pearls before everyone.
Right.
And if you decide, yeah, like you said, to hear, see, this was really funny. This actually came up not too recently, not too distant. We had our November 30th Feast of St. Andrew, and our speaker at Space Novum Lodge, 1183, plug for the lodge, prestigious education lodge here in Illinois. Our speaker was the Matt Stoles, also known as Traveling Matt. He's a 33rd degree elect, wonderful guy. And we asked him to give a talk, which he gave about Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, Knight Templar, all those things, and kind of their tie together. And he also knew that our audience was comprised of both Masons, non-Masons alike. So whether they were, significant others, partners, whatever, that was in his audience. And he said this at the beginning. He's like, look, I'm going to gloss over some things that you're going to want to hear more about. He's like, but listen, you're just going to have to really listen, because if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, we'll have to talk later.
Yeah, I'm just showing you the dots right now. I can connect them at a future setting. Yes.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite kind of subject matter to study? Just kind of in general, kind of even maybe going back to when we all grew up in school. Like what did you kind of gravitate towards? And then maybe kind of the fun thing would be like, what do you have you're not good at, so you don't value it, right? And you're like, please somebody else take care of that for me.
Yeah. Well, growing up, it was crazy, man. I was terrible at math. I couldn't get it. I wouldn't understand it very well. And that was a question that was later solved through a sort of motivational issue I had with that subject. But growing up, I always wanted to be, I think what a lot of us wanted to be, Indiana Jones, right? I mean, you'd watch the movies and all this stuff, and you're like, oh, cool, I want to go dig up dinosaurs, or I want, you know what it is? I just want to play in the dirt. I just want to play in the dirt. That's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to go outside. I wanted to dig stuff up and discover stuff, because I always had this feeling that we don't know. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to get like super hokey, but there has just got to be things that we knew before. And I think a lot of that stuff matters, and understanding how other cultures and civilizations thought about things. I mean, they thought about things in such a different way that it affected the way they lived their lives. And I think, those kinds of things were always super interesting to me. When we moved here to Illinois, my dad was in the service. So we were by the naval station, and there's a guy out here who's a big entrepreneur who had big ties to Egypt and to Zahi Hawass. And so because of that, his name is Jim Onan, Onan. You can look it up, and he built the Pyramid House, which is literally 15 minutes from my house. And growing up, you could pay $10 and go on a tour through his house. And then you could go to the gift shop, and then you could go to his recreation of the tomb of King Tut that they made. And he had all of these antiquities and real mummies and things from Egypt in his house. I mean, it's just bonkers, right? And this just fueled my love of Egyptology or archaeology or whatever. And
Yeah, just kind of ancient cultural,
yeah,
historical thoughts and kind of,
this
yeah,
this
just kind of, yeah.
this stuff just blew me away. My first book I got there was, this kind of pictorial book, ancient Egyptian civilizations, right? And then a few years later, I bought a book called The Ancient Near East, which is still collegiate reading material, and it's like, I don't know, probably 30th edition at this point. But like those are the things that always fascinated me. And then in my first year of high school, I started tanking in math. I talked to my grandpa, who was an electrical engineer, and he said something like, he gave me this weird, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but it motivated me, served me well, which was to say, you like science fiction and Star Trek. I'm a big Trekkie. Not like I wouldn't call myself like an expert, but I love Star Trek. Anyway, so he's like, if we ever encounter an ancient civilization, the only, or an alien civilization, the only thing we're going to have in common is mathematics and numbers and things. And I was like, oh. And so then I started paying more attention and, whatever. And then, so yeah, that paved the way for me to get my minor in math and my major in philosophy and religion. So, those are the things that I always wanted to do. And I went and I did them and I studied them. And now I work in a medical executive industry and I don't do anything what I went to school for. I could teach, I suppose, if I went and got my teaching certificate, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I answered this in the episode we recently did or not, but for me, it was always about, I think there's crossover there with history, but really when I got into high school, and I'm not really, even to this day, really there's a inside family joke that dad doesn't read. Uh, my beautiful daughter came up with that about 10 years ago. And for me though, the story, the the short stories, the essays, and those type of things caught my attention, and I really enjoyed that, and I remember really enjoying, and I think this kind of fuels over into Freemasonry. I think a lot of people that we love ritual and performing it and studying it and those type of things. Shakespeare really took hold of me a lot when we read those Midsummer's Night Dream, or like Edgar Allan Poe. Like very, I think if we did a survey, maybe we would find a lot of guys that had like a certain favorite poet. On Walden Pond, kind of
Yeah.
those transcendentalists. That probably started some of the
This is
places that I go nowadays.
fascinating to hear you say this because as you say it, maybe I've never thought about it. Maybe I'm thinking about it right now for the first time. I don't know. But thinking about why I loved these topics in school, why I was like, yeah, I will work full time and sign my entire paycheck over and get my degree for this thing because why? It's like a search for the unknown. And in masonry, this is it. Like we are on this constant search, right? For the word and whatever that means for you. But we're always kind of like looking to explore and to extrapolate and to pull the red thread, unravel things. Where does it go next?
The Scarlet Cord.
Yeah.
We're both in the Scarlet Cord, and it's kind of there. Yeah, it's like binding it all together. Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's see. What else do I have here for you? So you kind of mentioned it earlier, and this be a good point to talk about it. What's kind of your personal history and interest in Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, especially, or kind of with just kind of in that sector? I know you're well versed in a lot of those Hermetic philosophies and subject matters, but what about that one specifically?
Well, this has been interesting. I mean, the one on one hand, right? I studied philosophy and religion for school, so it's a study of looking for underlying and base philosophies that sort of occur in each religion, and it allows you to sort of compare and contrast and to have a at least a cursory base knowledge of uh, many of the big religions, many of the minor religions. I mean, something that Masons and esotericists might know about today. Uh, Zoroastrianism, right? But realistically, practice there's less than 200,000 people practice that globally. So that's small, even though it's a big idea in esoteric circles. Um, so my interest in Masonry, in terms of a lot of these mystic arts, things like Kabbalah, for instance, was in the Illinois Intender books. So these are books that, let's say Rodney was interested in Masonry, never joined, and he came to a lodge and he said, "Yeah, I'm interested. I want to petition." And he petitioned, and his investigation was favorable, and we informed him. And upon informing him that his investigation is positive, or he passed the investigation and we voted to accept his petition, we give him a book called On the Threshold, which is like a small booklet, maybe 10 pages or so, um, that would allow him to kind of sort of familiarize himself with Masonry, and also give him something that he can give to his significant other, their significant other, for their own edification about what this is. Now, as you progress in each degree, a new booklet is given to you. And in the third degree booklet, this is no secret. This is, nothing.
Monitorial.
Yeah, this is just, out there.
Public
And
knowledge.
the Grand Lodge of the State of Illinois Education Committee, back as far back as the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, I took a little hiatus on this verbiage sometime in the 60s, but came back to it and until current day says that every Master Mason should at least have a cursory knowledge of the Jewish system of mysticism known as the Kabbalah. And when I read that as a Master Mason, I was like, what the heck is that? So, of course, I go researching, and it leads me to the Zohar. And I think the first book I bought on it was the Zohar, The Idiot's Guide to the Zohar, which is tangential, I suppose. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. But what was incredible to me was the fact that the language in the Zohar, contextually anyway, like the meaning of the words at the time that they were written means something than what it does today. If you were to read the Zohar today in the language it's written and apply a modern day interpretation of those words, it does mean something different than what it did when the words were written, right? Like, for instance, in Masonic sense, we say the word condescending, condescending to your superiors. How does that work? And to be condescending today, if Jeff was being condescending to me, I would say he's being a jerk, right? But being condescending in the language of the 1700s or the 18th century doesn't exactly mean that. It's kind of like rising up to the occasion to speak with somebody on the level. So understanding that. So I looked at the Zohar contextually and I thought, wow, this is really bizarre because this, maybe it's just my mind making weird connections, but this sure sounds like physics. And that kind of captured my imagination. And I think from then on, like, it was just a matter of saying, well, yeah, this captures my imagination, but why does it capture my imagination? And kind of following those breadcrumbs throughout, different traditions, like something that nobody's ever been able to really satisfactorily answer for me, even though we've had conversations about this around. It's probably kind of unpopular, but I always wondered what the fascination with the Kabbalah is in Masonic circles, considering a precursor to Kabbalah is Neoplatonism and forms, which is already kind of westernized and doesn't require the amount of intense spiritual study as maybe the Zohar does.
Mm.
So I always kind of wondered maybe why we have such a fascination with something like uh, Kabbalah. But then I thought, well, it's probably because we have a foundation in a philosophy tradition, or you might even call it a mythology of the foundation of Solomon's temple. So it's tied to Old Testament ideas, and Old Testament ideas are tied to Judaism in some way or shape, and that can be tied to, right, Kabbalah. So maybe that's it. But I think that Masonry just in general opens up so many avenues of study, and we have so many, I guess, like there's probably hundreds of thousands of experts, quote unquote, non-practicing experts in so many of these areas because of just the drive and interest in the topics in these different philosophies.
If I don't know if I'm attempting to answer, and you'll be like, so what after this? But I think I listening to what you're saying, and I think there's a heavy emphasis from our entered apprentice degree, and probably whatever questions and answers, whatever catechism comes out of that, and then kind of revisiting certain things, whether it be in the 3 degree work itself or in the opening, closing, kind of the closing, especially a lot of times. I've been to different grand jurisdictions, and there's always an element and that we don't talk about, but there's a cosmology, a genesis, what happened in the beginning, and how that ties into with the concept of the great architect of the universe and geometry, and just like how everything is kind of what I kind of mentioned a little bit of, like natural science, natural law, and how those things have been anciently there. And I think Freemasons, even the ones that maybe are not as self-actualized, they still have a little bit of awe of that, which is kind of, to me, one of those 4 or 5 things that you have to have in your Grand Lodge jurisdiction that kind of qualifies you to turn in a petition and get voted favorably to move forward in the process of joining. And so I don't know if that helps you or not. That was my best.
No, I think it
We'll
does.
probably in February and in June of 2025, we'll probably get a chance to talk about that even more. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that does put some good context behind it. I mean, the other thing too is to really think about, well, regardless of whether or not how something sort of aligns, and people always have this tendency to say, well, what came first? And whatever that first thing was is the original, and throw everything out that came after it. Right. Um, Certainly, there are two sides to the, I guess, Kabbalistic coin, right? Like there's people who study Kabbalah, there's people who practice Kabbalah, one side, and the other side. I mean, you got people like Pico de Mirandola, who writes, heavily about the Kabbalah, but it's a Christian sense, right? And this came after. But it doesn't mean we get to throw away what Pico de Mirandola wrote about the Kabbalah. Uh, it's a sort of different flavor, a different viewpoint, a different lens, if you will. And I think we have to take into consideration, or at least maybe I should take into consideration, more the idea that at the time the ritual was being put to paper in practice, it may have just been that this was new, and this was seemed to fit.
Continental. It was a fad.
Yeah. I
And
mean, yeah, very
it
well.
kind of come over from the continent to the British Isles. It had been maybe found whenever guys were in the military, different parts of the British military all over the world, and kind of coming back and coming through different ports of call and
Yeah.
spending time
And
and kind of working
again,
their way back. And they get here and they're like, hey,
there is
just really
again,
great
there's
knowledge that we need to add in here and kind of work in. Yeah.
yeah, well, again, I think there's also this, conversation that should be had too, which is about the sort of attraction we have for our personality types, I would say. Um, that we have towards the mystical and the challenge of understanding because of the reward of what that might bring. Will we find the thing? Will we uncover something crazy and wild and oh my gosh, just mind blowing? And I think in that stage in human history, I mean, as the rituals being written and these things are kind of coming out, we're seeing the paving of the road that led to fire and brimstone preaching. We're seeing the road that led to later offshoots of other esoteric orders. And then eventually into the spiritualist movement that overtakes the world. And I think all of that is still so in vogue in our circles that this is certainly in my mind, I think one of the reasons why a lot of this stuff has stayed around, even though there may be easier paths.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it goes to, well, I jokingly have said on a recent thing that, hi, I'm Jeff, kind of like I'm in a support group and everybody's introducing themselves. Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm a ritual, I'm a I'm a fraternity ritual addict. Uh, Hi, Jeff, all that stuff. And so, and I think there's a certain, I've started calling it our tribe, that we're gathering in our tribe into the encampment, and that we're all finding each other even more. And it's kind of like, hey, I'm bringing my little group to come hang out at the bigger powwow, and we're going to really get together and do some things that we can't do geographically restricted. And I think that's where we're starting to just have some fun in kind of, and by the way, we're very open. It's a very big tent, and there's a place for everybody. And you don't have to do it. Just and that's kind of my whole thing with Freemasonry. I think I meant to say it's about 4 questions back, but there's a thing that I heard one time when they were talking about playing soccer. I watch a lot of soccer, and this commentator, former player, I think it might have been one of the Robbies on the NBC Sports panel, I think Robbie Earl. He says he's enjoying his football. And I think I want people to enjoy their Freemasonry, not my Freemasonry, not my, what you were talking about earlier. But I want it to be, what did they find special? What motivates them, and what will keep them, even if it's that truck driver, engaged in listening as he's going down the interstate? What's going to keep his heart and mind kind of improving, and making himself better first, his family, his community, and the world, which is kind of a call within a lot of different types of groups, right? Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, usually Christianity, and that's even kind of biblical too. So there's a lot of wisdom in that. There's a lot of just, I don't care how you label or who said it or what you want to attribute to. Truth is truth. So, moving on. Initiation. I kind of brought that up, and I love talking about. I love being a part of it. I love studying it. I love. I'm writing a study guide now that is going to come out in 2025 for the Order Secret Monitor, and I just love thinking about it and experiencing it. Where do you kind of fall in that?
In terms of the idea of
Just
initiation,
what do
or
you like about the initiatic experience that you've received in Freemasonry? The actual physical performance of it, and then kind of coming back to that and revisiting it, getting to see that same degree performed again and again and again, and those type of things. And then we're you and I are in a lot of invitational bodies and a lot of different things. We're in a lot of the same groups.
for
And
sure.
so, without going into a lot of detail on that, but just kind of that whole overall experience, where is that kind of led you to today? To your
Initiation in a Masonic fraternity, perhaps even when not done to a degree of professionalism that one might expect, is still an experience unlike anything else in your entire life. Um, I don't know that I'll ever experience anything like I experienced when I got my first, second, and third degrees in Masonry ever again in my life. They were transformative. Um, and let's not say that they were like transformative in the sense that the second I was made a Mason, a light switch went off. It's transformative in the same way going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week over a year gets you results, right? It's transformative over time, and not because I got initiated.
Mhm.
It's because I got initiated, went through something very profound that is an experience. So that's awesome. You all watch Forged in Fire, the show where they make knives and swords and stuff.
Well, yes, I have seen that.
Okay. So now imagine initiation is like the first hammer strike after you're a sword coming out of the fire, right? To get shaped. And every hammer strike after that is like going to another degree. Not your degrees, perhaps, but witnessing other people's degree, taking a part in the degree, learning the words in the ritual. Not because I want you to help your lodge, dude. I mean, that's a cool thing, right? You're going to help your lodge do a degree. Awesome. But if we're being completely honest, you will reach a point of proficiency in delivering ritual where you actually understand not only what you're saying, but the allegory of why you're saying it. And that is like the kind of growth that you see over time, and why it is important that I'm not going to diminish a Mason who goes through a 1 day class and never goes to another meeting again. Cool. You got out of it what you wanted, I guess. That's what you want. That's cool. I'm glad. But I will tell you this, you're missing out. You're not as informed. You're not as
And
proficient.
I think I would add, we don't have 1 day where I'm at, but we do festivals for York Rite
Yeah.
and
You
reunions.
just, the
But
thing is, without being a part of it
yeah,
over time and being involved, you're just not as knowledgeable. And that means externally knowledgeable and internally or
yeah,
esoterically knowledgeable about those things. And that sort of internal knowledge, the intrinsic knowledge that you get from consistent practice of the royal art, is the transformative art that makes one man better than he was yesterday. And that's the PC way of saying it. I mean, I could say that's the reason why Jeff Bennett's better than some dude on the street. I mean, I could say that, but we won't say that. We'll say Jeff Bennett is better man today than he was yesterday because he practices masonry,
yeah.
amongst other things, right? So I think that's important.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different things that we've talked about. I think a new term that I've just come up with and incorporating it in my writings is artistic curiosity. And I think sometimes and I think there's maybe an engineering or a mathematic curiosity. Like they're just trying to get the form down. They're not so much worried about kind of the aesthetics. And I think a lot of us are worried about the aesthetics also, as well as the forms. And I think what you're talking about is you're going to get to a point, you've got to learn the ritual first. People always want to shortcut it. They always want the little, the pill that's going to help them lose weight without going to the gym. And you've got to go to degree work. You've got you've got to consume it to where you own it, and to where it just comes, it kind of flows back out of you. So so when you get to go to actual initiation experiences, are you sitting on the sidelines, or is it kind of a combination of sitting on the sidelines and kind of what, you kind of talked, I think, a little bit about your candidate experience, but any of that kind of like, where would you kind of, the different viewpoints and kind of the different angles there?
Yeah. So here's the thing. If I'm going to, like, I'm at my lodge every time it meets. I'm a member of a couple lodges here, Space Novum 1183 and my mother lodge, Waukegan 78. Waukegan 78, very traditional Masonic experience. And in that, we process candidates fairly regularly. I'm never on the sidelines for a degree. I will always be a part in some degree. And if there is a part that's missing, I will learn it. And I think that is because I value the experience that I got, and I want to give that and pay it forward. When our other lodge, Space Novum, which is an education lodge, but we have to still do work. When we have candidates, right now we have an entered apprentice degree. We have an entered apprentice with us. So when it comes time for his fellowcraft degree and his master mason degree, you bet your butt I'm going to be doing some portion of that degree, either one of them. I don't think I've ever attended a degree where I wasn't doing something. And that's just because I volunteer to do it. When I'll hear a lodge is doing a degree, and if I'm available to go to that lodge for the degree, I'll go. And if they need help, cool. If they don't, I mean, I don't think I've sat on the sidelines 10 times in my life.
Yeah.
But not to say that it wasn't needed, right? Like, not because somebody didn't show up. It's because I volunteered to do something,
Right.
whether it's a degree or heck, even sit in a steward's chair where I'm not going to do anything but hold a rod all night, or you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. I'm always there to do something. And I think, aside from the kind of holistic or altruistic idea of giving back, is also to learn, right? I want to learn more. I want to learn more about what it means to do this. I want to get the experience of, working with this group of brothers. It's a unique and wholly.
Yeah, it is that teamwork thing where you kind of, after you've done a degree with someone, or you've been a part of that and they're the candidate, there is this extra special kind of, it's almost sweet, it's tart, it's almost everything. It's almost like a taste. You almost get like, or there's this different vibe almost. And so, wow, yeah, that's definitely where the thing that I'll say to kind of balance that is I'm in a lot of York Rite conferrals. I'm not in my area. Tarrant County has some of the greatest ritualists that exist in the world, and they don't really need me in certain parts. And we have teams, and so I go and kind of do stage manager stuff, kind of handle like candidates and work with them, and just same way though. What do you need me to do? Okay, you need me to. It's not even my building, but I'll go back in the regalia closet and just start pulling out all the right things for the next, especially if we're doing maybe a
Mm-hmm.
past master and a most excellent master. How do you? I'll be the stage crew, and I'll
Yeah.
feed out the right stuff and put the right
Well,
stuff back.
I'm trying to, you know, I don't think he'll argue with me if I attribute this to him, but I think back, Chad Kopensky is a Ohio Mason. He's a past state education officer, and we were just talking about lodge stuff one day, and he encapsulated very simply. It's not about me. It's, hey, how can I help? You just show up. How can I help? What do you need me to do? And that's always it. You know, I will go and speak at a lodge, and I show up the day before, and they're like, "Hey, we'll come. I'll pick you up at the airport. We'll grab some lunch or something. Let's go over and check out the lodge space." Cool. We get to the lodge space, and then the whoever picked me up or whatever, the master of the lodge is there, and they're setting out chairs. I just start setting up chairs too.
Right.
Like, we're all they're like, "Oh, you don't have to do this."
Yeah.
I'm here to work, buddy. That's what we're doing together. We're doing this together. It's a
Yeah.
fellowship. It's education. It's coming together and sharing the experience and working together, like you said. It's wild, especially like, you ever done the thing where you go and you know your part really well, and you show up and there's a bunch of people there you've never worked with before, and for instance, let's say the three of us were some fellow crafts. I'm F1, you're F2, Rodney's F3, and we've never worked together ever. But in the degree, we didn't miss a step, a word, and we worked together perfectly. I love when that happens. And like, every time I go out and this happens, it's always a different group of fellow crafts, and I end up working with them. And after it, I'm like, man, we just nailed that. And it's so much fun. I just love the camaraderie of it as well.
Yeah, and we have some of those experiences at Masonic Week, bringing everybody together. There's no practice when we go to the Supreme Ruler degree, and those guys, shout out to Chris Potts, Jason Craig, Ralph Roll, BJ Young. They're just like, what can we do? And we just want to make this successful, and a lot of help from a lot of different people, because you can't fly with 9 swords in your suitcase. That then I had to go borrow some. It's fun kind of being in a hotel. And
TSA doesn't like swords.
Yeah. So kind of with that, talking, kind of staying on this, what happens whenever you get into a real deep contemplation? Maybe you have gone to fill in the blank degree or group, or maybe you advanced in a Masonic group, because I'm still advancing in some myself. I'm not totally finished with everything, and I'm still at that stage 25 years after the fact, and still getting invited to new types of groups and getting kind of these little twists. And we won't go too far into the details of that, but you get in this deep contemplation state, and something you gain, and you're like, it's a Bob Davis moment. It's that complete masonry thing where you have enough knowledge now and you have enough degree work that they all start playing off of each other like they should. They all start, all the either you want to look at it like two gears coming together, or like pieces of puzzles, and you finally get, this is what it's supposed to look like over here on the box, and now it looks like that on my kitchen table. And so when you get in those states, kind of like, what does that kind of look like to the rest of us?
It's like flow state, man. Flow state masonry. I love the way you illustrated that in my mind anyway, with the puzzle box and the kitchen table puzzle. I mean, when I was a much younger Mason, I used to think like, man, maybe all the jurisdictions and things do it a little bit different, so that it sort of forces you to see it all, so that you can see all of the right parts, and maybe, just maybe, you'd be able to pick out the real parts and put them all together in the right order that they should be in, or something, but
you're building Jefferson's Bible is what you're doing.
yeah, that's a great allegory. Love that. So yeah, I think being able to, it's kind of like aha moments. I mean, similar to you, right? I mean, I've joined a number of different organizations over the years, uh, some Masonic adjacent, some kindred sciences, if you will. Um, and I think all of them for the most part offer a deeper understanding of masonry, which at least I have deemed for myself to be of value in the betterment of how I operate in this world, right? So, like, if somebody came up to me tomorrow, Jeff, and said, "We want to invite you to the illustrious order of Masonic collectors," I'd be like, "Awesome." And they'd say, "Yeah, the dues or whatever, this, that, and the other." And it's like, "All right, cool. What do we get out of that?" And if there isn't like a real value, if there isn't like something more than a dues card and a progressive line that you bounce through, there was a time I would have said sure. But anymore, it's not about the due. I don't care about that. I'm financially stable. Listen, it's about, is that going to help me practice the kind of masonry that allows me to do what I think masonry calls me to do, right? Which I think it calls everybody to do, right? Which is to be, to for the welfare of your fellow creatures, right? Exert your talents and to do those things and to help in all of those areas. I would say no, right? But there are a number of organizations I think that have sort of provided some scratch to an itch that I've had. And diving into some of those organizations, uh, other texts and things have become available to me that I've been able to read and study. And I love reading, but I also find reading completely daunting at times. I like if I am reading a book and I flip a page and I'm hoping it's toward the end of a chapter and I know I want to stop at the end of a chapter and I flip the page and it's another two full pages and no line breaks, I'm just like, oh my God. Like I just don't want to read anymore, right? And so sometimes reading is a challenge for me. It's always a challenge for me, not because I don't want to read it, just because it's like I need ingestion rapidly of information, and I read at speed, so I don't like fast read. I read the way I'm talking, so it takes me a while to get through stuff, and it allows me to get into those books and sort of comprehend things as I'm reading them. And you ask, what's it look like? It looks like me all of a sudden breaking out a flow chart on my computer, like typing up maps and how things connect to other things. It's kind of like I've never watched the show, but I've seen the meme, right, of Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and they're looking for uh was it Pepe Silva or something like that, right? And he's got like the big conspiracy board with the red thread going everywhere, and like that's what it looks like, unfortunately. That's what it looks like, probably to my wife. To me, it's just chalkboard.
Yeah, for me, it's like what we used to call internet surfing, or you're just kind of like ding ding. Mine's more like a
30
pinball machine.
tabs.
Yeah, mine's more like a pinball machine. Like yeah, yeah, just, like yeah, like So one of the questions that I try to ask on every episode is, do you consider yourself a mystic? You've talked a lot about mysticism on this episode.
Yeah, so I guess I retain probably 95 to 98% of what I read just because My brain functions that way. And in that sense, I have a repository of information that I can reference and cross-reference, and occasionally original thoughts come out, or thoughts about other things. I don't think I'm a mystic. I think, in a traditional sense, it's more kind of like the Hermit tarot card. I might know some things, but my job is essentially to stand on the cliff, hold up the lantern so that anybody interested can climb up there. When you get to me, I can be like, okay, let me show you this. Okay, now look behind me. It goes up higher. I'll hold the lamp down here and keep going, buddy. I mean, for me, that's what it's kind of about. I mean, I've always thought about. Um, I love continuing education, and I think that is probably one of the reasons why I love masonry, is because it's continuous self improvement, self masonry, self propagating new things and new things to learn all the time. And so when I think about that, you know, I don't know if Rodney has kids, Jeff. I know you do.
Yeah, Rodney has kids. Yeah.
So our
Rodney has.
kids, I got 4 kids that I know for a fact are going to solve problems that none of us can comprehend as existing. Like, they're going to solve problems that we can't imagine would even be a problem. And not because we lack the intelligence or the imagination, because biologically, our brains are just not where theirs will end up being, right? They're going to experience things and make new synapse connections that we just won't, right? We can try, but they're going to go farther. And that's their job, right? Their job is to go farther than we have ever gone before. Every person's job is to carry the baton a little further than the last person. And in that, I think that sort of progressive educational model, that progressive philosophy, uh, you know, Nietzsche gets a bad rap, but the Superman is real. Like, we need to pave the way to for the Superman. We need to pave the way and sort of acknowledge the fact that the continuous education, our kids, the future Masons, they're going to look back at what we struggled with today, and probably they won't laugh because they're Masons, and they'll be like, well, they did the best they could with what they had. But a lot of the things that we're dealing with today, they'll find insignificant. And I think, part of what we are is a progressive moral institution that just comes with the territory.
So,
I kind of
so
forgot your original question.
mystic, and so I mean,
Yeah.
mystic for me is you're kind of within your person, within kind of maybe your consciousness, you're connecting with divinity. You're trying maybe even sometimes you're blessed with
Yeah.
I'll say something about like interactions, at least in your own kind of your own mind, your own soul. You have this, like, we've been kind of dancing around at this
We can
whole
get weird.
episode.
We can get weird. I'll talk about some weird stuff.
We're the unseen world, like you feel like, every now and then you kind of put your head on the other side of the
With,
veil and take a peek
yeah, yeah.
behind the curtain.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt, I've had
And
moments.
that's what I would say mystic,
Yeah. I mean, if that's what that is, then yeah, without a doubt. It started many, 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 many years ago with experiences as a kid.
Yeah.
Probably like, things happening during twilight sleep, and in and out of kind of semi-conscious, what do you call that? Sleep paralysis. Sort of experimented with a lot of that stuff
Well, it's
later.
supposed to be the dream state or something in that,
Hmm.
kind of where we've looked at the brain, and that's when a certain stage of sleep, there's that kind of dream state.
Yeah, and so thinking about that is also something else that kind of paved the way to thinking about the metaphysical, which for me, my mom is a Roman Catholic, but she also owns like 100 Shirley MacLaine books on crystals and shit. So I always tell her she's going to hell. But anyway, like I grew up, in this kind of new agey household, but also with the overbearing, very dogmatic, spiritual, and magical Roman Catholicism. So, um, lots of experiences with intentional devotional activities,
Mm-hmm.
um, whether that's prayer or mantras or meditation. And later on, I would say right around 30, my mid, just before my mid 30s, I met a I guess we just call him. I met my first teacher, my like the first successful teacher on in terms of like metaphysical sort of guru-ish stuff. And this person I'll call T. T proved to me that experiences that one could have were real, and that in that he could tell me what to do, and I would do them, and the next day he would say, "Did you do it?" And I'll say, "Yeah, of course, right?" He's like, "And then you heard what?" And I told him what I heard, and he handed me an envelope. And when I opened the envelope, it's exactly what I said I heard. And he's like, "I knew you heard it." So, like, there are these sort of mystical experiences that there's a science behind that is something else, where I'm always on the search for,
Yeah.
like exploring these topics. I mean, I think, in the early 20th century, spiritualist movements and Theosophical Society would have called this sort of like the astral plane or whatever. Um, if you buy into that, I'm not a big astral plane kind of guy, but I would say there's something, and it is a realm. I
Yeah,
mean, I would,
there's a gathering place for sure, and
yeah,
that's probably pretty broadly accepted in a lot of even really devout, whatever you want to say, Christian circles. I mean, they believe in that unseen world. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's pretty kind of almost universal in a way of it's over here, it's over there, and so not that that
there was,
much, not that there's that much quantity that makes it that it's got to exist, but it's kind of like that's a pretty good thought there that if you
well,
see here and if it's kind of the same thing being pursued here and here and here and here with people
there's,
that wouldn't really agree on a lot of other stuff.
but it's
That's
that they know that's there.
yeah.
Yeah, I was, a very quick anecdote. We were at sort of a retreat, a bunch of us for a Masonic adjacent kind of thing. Well, it was Freemasonry, right? But we were working on a project together. In one of our group meditation sessions, T and we'll say C, this was early on, and I don't know how much I like when I meditate, I visualize a lot. Um, I like go places, see things, and then I can come out of it and I can write them down. And I remember after the meditation, T and C came to me and they were like, "Did you feel anything?" And blah 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 blah. And I was like, "Yeah." Like I wrote it down, and they laughed. And they said we. So the place where we were was we were the back room uh, of the Philosophical Research Society down in California there. the what's his name?
Manly P. Hall.
Manly P.
Yeah,
Hall's
I was
joint.
about to say,
Yeah.
I was about to ask you, is that where, yeah, is
Uh-huh.
that the group that he started? And
Yeah, so apparently TNC saw an apparition behind me during a meditation session, not of Manly Hall, of somebody else. And I was like really weirded out by that. And I was like, there's no way or whatever. Um, and T of this guy, my the first teacher I had, is actually my second teacher. Anyway, so T says, I'm back home in Chicago, and he calls me on the phone, and we're just chit chatting. And he goes, well, what do I have to tell you so that you believe? And I was like, I don't know. And he goes, well, if you don't know, he said something like, maybe you should stop taking off your bracelets and rings every night and, setting them on Ganesh. And I was like, what? Yeah. And then I realized that on my nightstand, I have a little statue of Ganesh where his trunk is up, it like holds my rings and my. I was like, so that's when I realized, like, yeah, this dude he knows how to access things, and it's legit. So mysticism is real, folks. If anything, I want to believe.
so kind of leads into what would you say? Let's say where Whence Came You Media Group, the podcast. What do you say? Like, kind of, what was like kind of those early Masonic things that happened to you? The mentor person took you underneath your the wing. Your inspiration. Like, what was like? Wow, this is something I'm going to turn in this direction. Follow it this path.
Yeah. So
Or
my first mentor, the guy who taught me my catechism, and also a lot about life, was a guy named Curtis Carmen. Curtis was an older guy who had four fingers on his left hand and five on his right. And he was just born that way. This is kind of a deformity. And I'll tell you why this matters in a minute. Uh, Smoked inside the lodge building, even though that's forbidden. Uh, while he taught me my catechism, what am I supposed to do? I'm just nobody. I'm not going to tell him he can't smoke, right? And in between cigarettes, he'd hit his albuterol inhaler. Told me that he would turn his hearing aids off at nighttime so that if the house was burning down, he could just die in bed and not have to worry about anything. Um, the guy was salt of the earth, real, real deal guy. Masonry saved his life and his marriage. He'll say that. He used to tell me that all the time. Um, and it's just we spent 10 minutes talking about the catechism, the memory work in between degrees, and then 45 minutes about life. He would tell me he was like this crazy. He's like, I used to just drink all night and come home and all this. And he told me one time, this will be a good one for you guys. He said one day he was really drunk and he came home late and he knocked on the door to his house because he didn't have his keys. And his wife opened the door and she said, drunk again. And he said, you too? And I guess he slept on the couch for a couple nights. And but he was just he then later went to AA and cleaned up, and he never drank again, and just a real interesting guy. Moved up to Illinois in the early 20th century, trying to get work at like 12 years old, only having four fingers on one hand, which in those days they just thought like if you had any physical deformity, you also had a sort of uh, mental deficiency, and so he couldn't get work. But he retired as a union foreman for some auto company up here in Illinois, and like just a real awesome guy. Was always upfront about all of his. He would tell me, he's like, he would tell me about his prejudices and things, but also tell me he's aware of them, knows they're wrong, and has tried to move past them. Like, he was so open and honest about these things, and he's why I credit my ability as a grown man to look at myself and ask myself hard questions about my own cultural, religious, and philosophical, mythological biases that I might have. Right. And then after Curtis passed away, um, he wasn't exactly the spiritual guru I needed, right? Like, my family was Roman Catholic, but I went through periods of I was a Roman Catholic, then I was an atheist, throughout my teenage years, because of course I knew better than everybody. And then I go to college and I became agnostic, and then I became a believer, in my own way. And nobody, though, offered a helping hand when it came to me attempting to explain the divine with science. Because every time I would attempt to do so, they would tell me, like, well, now you're taking the divinity out of it, and it's kind of disrespectful to the system. And it's like, well, it doesn't mean that the system is any less divine. It just means I think this is how it works, and that's okay. Uh, I remember one of the popes said something like, proof of extraterrestrial life doesn't mean humanity is any smaller. It means it's bigger. And in
Well,
this same instance,
yeah, that's the Yahweh God, the Creator. That
yeah,
I mean, yeah, and I'll just, I think you'll. It's like I've thought about that, and I'm like, well, it doesn't disprove this over here. It just means that God's the God that we want that we think He is. That we feel like He's been. This is His. And people. I'm from a very. The Bible is the Bible, and it says what it says, and that's very literal. And in that, there's the Bible is His story to us. Not
yeah,
there might be other us's, and that's okay. And
yeah. And I think something that makes it very special is the idea of bigness. I went through. I think anybody who's anywhere in their life who has a solid and firm, not even a faith, a knowing, has been in a place of, let's say, religious uncertainty. And, there was a point where I was a Mason and I thought, I just don't know if I can continue to be a Mason, or I can continue to be a Mason. I was giving some deep thought to the idea of creation, the idea of the Big Bang, all of the science that has come a long way, and just even in the past 10 years on, what comes before, after the expansion, all of these kinds of things. How does this relate? The idea of uh, the equations that lead to us as humans being here right now. There's a great argument to say it's the happiest accident to ever happen. And in that, you can be satisfied. Like, it is, in and of itself, perhaps the greatest miracle ever. But it doesn't explain the vast disparity in probabilities that give us what we have. Like there's no way to really, I mean, like it's massive numbers to say we shouldn't be here, but we are. So there has to have some, in my mind, divine creation. And I thought about how we are one in, right? Pick a number. And I thought, well, that doesn't mean we're special. We're just, I mean, we're special, but we're not like created for any purpose. And then I started thinking about the immensity of the expanse that we live in this universe. They talk about its expansion. And then I remembered, as if given a given probability exists within a closed system, if that enclosed system expands, the probability expands. So almost you could say intelligent life might be very common in the universe. And the probability that things have lined up for so many things in the universe has allowed, to move toward a path of intelligent design.
So that's something that we all have to kind of answer for ourselves. And I think you're right. I think we go through different phases, and my response, kind of echoing a few things I've said. One of the big things that I kind of step back and is like, there's a modern arrogance to me that we know everything. I think we're like, we can't even make out the the license plate, and we can barely see the tail lights of the creator. And or we don't even, it's like, so far we have to like hey, almost get on the CB or something and say, hey, where are you at? What mile marker are you at? Because I'm way back here. And we can't even get a visual, and we think that we're like up there driving the bus and everything is on the bus, and that's the whole thing. And I think that's been disproved how many times in the last 500 years, 400 years, all these things. And so I think we just need to take a step back sometimes and not be so proud of ourselves in kind of a cosmic sense. I want us to be proud of ourselves in this terrestrial sense. We need that. I mean, that we need to rejoice and we need to celebrate humanity for all the good things it is. Then there's a step back, and it's kind of like, okay, and it's kind of funny. You said that, and you said purpose, and you kind of said, well, the first line in the first chapter, I did read one book every now and then, is The 40 Days of Purpose by Rick Warren. And it says the first line is it's not about you. Your purpose is not about you. It's about purpose. It's not about you. It's like your purpose is kind of a part of the purpose. It's kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, is paving a way forward. The idea that it's not about us, that it's about, you said, you made mention of kind of, losing sight of, not, you said we could see the license plate, but we can't see the taillights or whatever.
Yeah, that was probably not the greatest thing, but yeah,
Well,
I tried.
but it made me think. I went right back to Nietzsche, right? In the book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the whole thing is about man's sort of arrogance. It says, when Zarathustra arrived at the nearest town, which adjoined the forest, he found many people assembled in the marketplace, for it had been announced that a rope dancer would give a performance. So there's all these people in the crowd. And Zarathustra, kind of in a moment of confusion, perhaps thought they were there for him. He says to the crowd, I teach you the Superman. Man is something that is to be surpassed. And then he turns to the crowd and he says, what have you done to surpass man? All beings hitherto have created something beyond themselves, and you want to be the ebb of the great tide and would rather go back to the beast than surpass man. And then he calls man a laughing he says, what is ape to the man? A laughing stock, a thing of shame. And just the same shall man be the Superman, a laughing stock, a thing of shame. Ye have made your way from the worm to man, and much within you is still worm. Then he says, once you were apes, and even yet man is more of an ape than the apes. Even the wisest among you is only a disharmony, a hybrid of plant and phantom. But do I bid you become phantoms or plants? Lo, I teach you the Superman, or the Ubermensch, right? And this quote where he goes into the market and he makes this announcement, the thing that always sticks to me is this sort of human arrogance idea that Masonry in particular seems to want to change. And this is the arrogance. You think you are the ebb of the great tide. In other words, we think we're the water that will reach the farthest on shore, but we're not. And the sooner we come to grips with this, the sooner I realize it, Rodney, Jeff, anybody listening realizes that you are a part of the great machine that should reach as far as you can, so that the people who come next can reach even farther. The better off we'll all be.
So for me, whenever I have maybe something on my plate that I need to write upon, maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to go in and outline a block of Whence Came You podcast episodes, and you just need to do something creative, right? And maybe it's what are you going to listen to, or maybe what are you going to watch on a movie or a TV series or something like that? Is there something that's just almost like automatically, as soon as you put it on, 30 seconds later, you're already triggered, and you're like already kind of what I was kind of talking about, being in this other kind of state?
Yeah, I think I find a lot of inspiration from, I guess, weird places, right? Like I do go back to philosophers all the time, and not super popular philosophers. I will, like I said, Nietzsche, or I might go back to Plato's Republic, or I might go back to heck, even Karl Marx. I don't know who I'll be reading, or other times, laugh all you want. I mean, I'll be watching Ancient Aliens or some show about UFOs. I mean, it doesn't really matter. What happens is
Okay,
I
you just spurred a couple of questions whenever Rodney gets his chance, because he that's, man, that's like his drum beat right there.
yeah, I
That's
mean, I
salsa.
find inspiration in all of these areas. Um, Mostly because more than statements, they ask questions within the program. Even philosophers are never really making statements. If they're making a statement, it's through an allegory, like in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. But if, on a television show or something, it's kind of like Chariots of the Gods, right? Eric von Daniken got kind of attacked when he wrote Chariots of the Gods, but people don't, they was like, oh, he's saying all these things, but he's like, no, I mean, every line in that book almost has a question mark after it. Like he's just asking questions. And I think asking questions that sort of excite the imagination and get us thinking about things in several different ways, and also having a diverse selection of inspirational material also is kind of fodder for the human mind. I mean, can't tell you how many times like I've been watching, some show about mediumship or ghosts or something, and then an hour later I'm watching something about the E8 lattice as it pertains to um, some quantum theory or something, and I'm like, oh man, I wonder if ghosts are actually just visualizations of time slips. Like, who knows? And then you're just like sitting there on your phone, like, vocalizing a note or something, and then you never get to it, or maybe you do get to it when you sit down. But yeah, I find inspiration all over the place. Sometimes it's listening to Masonic podcasts. Many times I'm in lodge listening to somebody reflect on some element of the degree, or doing their own Masonic education. And I'm that guy with his little. If I'm on the sidelines, I've got my little black notebook. If I'm an officer or something, you'll see me with my tablet or something writing down stuff. But yeah, I'm always taking notes. And it's funny, just I don't even know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I dropped my notebook and I picked it up. And as I was flipping to get through back to a certain page, I had a brother in the foyer of a lodge go, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. What was that?" I'm like, "What?" They're like, "I just saw some Indiana Jones stuff in there." And I was like, "Oh, it's because I doodle in there, right?" But I'm doodling, trestle boards or whatever else. And I think we all kind of do that stuff. And it's just important. You talked about, um, what did you say? It was creative or imaginative artistry or artistic imagination or creativity. You mentioned it earlier, Jeff, and that's kind of what I'm getting to is you got to be thirsty for it.
Well, great. Yes, RJ, I would say that um, great discussion so far. We're going to bring in my co-host, my partner in crime, uh, the Icarus. No, he's not the Icarus. What is he? He's the greatness from Indiana, the Hoosier State, and it's Rodney McGilvery. And he's going to ask a few questions after I get in my last couple that I had. So, if you could not have money as a constraint and all the things that we have in our modern world that hold us back from maybe if we get to be selfish, what would you do kind of in perpetuity? If you're on that space where everything is taken care of, you don't have to sort of, everything is kind of put over to the side and you're just able to focus on what you want to focus on, RJ. What would you do with your time that you still have?
Man, I think I would do two things. Uh, I think we all have our talent that we can assist in certain areas, and I think we all have I don't know what you want to call it, a mental side hustle, something that we would love to study or we love to do, whether that's, crafting, or, whatever the case is. I could be a grand secretary. I could be a grand secretary for like the next 30, 40 years, probably 35, 25, 30 years. I could do that. But I think, I think, in terms of creativity and my personal interests, man, I would, I would love to just go back to school and I would get another degree and I'd probably do something like archaeology and I'd love to just get a gig working at like the Field Museum, you know, and um being in a place where like I'm behind like the glass cleaning something while students on field trips walk by. I'll be honest. That to me sounds amazing because then I get to be there and inspire and learn at the same time. And those things are like really what's very important to me, like um, working with and inspiring kids in things that I found to be inspiring and cool as a kid. archaeology or paleontology or Egyptology, any of those kinds of things, like how cool. You think about movies like Night at the Museum or yeah, the Mummy movies, or anything like that, where you just have these people who facilitate and foster a love of learning and are there to literally, inspire you to learn the thing and to discover something and to move it forward. And I think I love that idea. You know, uh, of course, there's also the let me just move to wherever the Reitman Museum is or book library is and live there and read books all day. Sure. But the realist in me says, I have to have something that gives a purpose that is external to myself. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I could be a full-time Mason with a private jet at my beckoning call,
Yep.
and just bounce around and do all the things that I think are cool and all the places I want to be, and along with that, I'm almost kind of living through some of the projects that are going on now and some of the things I've gotten to do already. Kind of be this kind of Masonic theologian is what I'm kind of looking to do, and kind of in that vein, and kind of really bring out my background. I mean, I can't not be myself, right? And so for me, there's a lot of that. So I appreciate that. The other thing is, if you had a magical, now this is kind of said in this episode that we didn't want to really get to all the eels of our great fraternity spread out across the globe in every time zone. But if you had a magic ability, this magic wand, some kind of power to transform the culture of Freemasons for an amplification of Freemasonry, what would that look like?
I would love if I had a magic wand that I could wave that ensured truly that the people getting involved or wanting to come into Masonry have some sort of fire in themselves to do something. Um, and that they're like, and this means that they're also, uh, a good person, right? That they're not joining the fraternity for motives, that they're also legitimately not criminals. Uh, it's there's no secret that I think a lot of the issues in Masonry today um, are dealing with trials and tribulations that are because of the time and place in which we live. The world is huge. Nobody can know everybody, right? So background checks are a thing, or should be. Um, and we need to look out for all of those things, but also to ensure that there is some sort of spark of fire or something in somebody, that they want to accomplish something, that they want to be better, that they want to give back, that they want to be involved. That I think that's really important. And I don't know that I could change much else besides doing that, because I really am happy with the brothers that I know, that I interact with. And I think, barring anything else besides something like uh you know the direction or the intuition of somebody coming into the craft, or perhaps their uh spurious activities in their personal lives, we might suffer, right? I wouldn't want to like change the fact that I do know good men who are truly good men and have fire in their eyes to do something in this fraternity are members. I wouldn't want to change that. I guess I would want to amplify that. And ensure we don't bring anybody we shouldn't be bringing into the fraternity.
So, last couple questions, a little bit more lighthearted than what a little bit more just cultural. We try to have some fun on this platform on this podcast. So no wrong answers, but I do like for people to kind of give me a reason why you answered that, just because. So first question: Stones or Beatles?
God. I okay. I'm gonna go Beatles. I have to say why? Or I don't
I
have to
think
say
so.
why.
Yeah, I think you need.
Okay.
You're gonna make
So I say the
you're gonna make
Beatles
a
because
definitive statement. Yeah.
yeah, I would say the Beatles because even though I'm not a huge fan of the music, I do find that it's at least in a sense timeless. Um, they were perhaps one of the first bands to lyrically tell stories that were sort of like timeless and relevant to a modern audience. Um, the reason for not picking the Stones is I just was much more of a New York Dolls fan. If you
Yeah, I
know,
don't know that. I don't know that
well, all
reference.
right. So the New York Dolls were described as a sleazier version of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
If you know, if you remember Buster Poindexter, he was the lead
Yeah.
singer uh, of the New York Dolls. I always felt that the Rolling Stones, while a good band, um, and were more my style in aggressive rock and roll music. Uh, I don't know. I felt like maybe I like I like my music a little more trashy.
There's a country song from the '90s. I like my women just a little bit on the trashy side. Yeah,
Yep,
when they wear their clothes too tight and
guilty.
their hair's all hairsprayed up high. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
a little bit too much lipstick and a little bit too much rouge. Well, I think for the mainstream, the Stones have been that though. I mean, they have been pushing the envelope to that extent. Um, Mick and the boys. Well, so I usually I'll just let that be said.
They don't even
Okay.
have a bass player. They got to hire one every tour. Uh,
So the other fun one that I'm going to do is, and I think you've already answered it tonight, and but I want to start asking this one: Star Wars or Star Trek?
oh yeah, I'm Star Trek all day. Um, the reason is Star Trek is a space western, and I like that. But more than that, my first favorite TV show of all time is Star Trek: The Original Series, TOS, Captain Kirk, right? And I liked that. My second favorite TV show of all time was The Twilight Zone under Rod Serling. And the reason why I liked both of those shows, and this is the reason why Star Trek is the number one for me, is because there was a message behind the episode.
Mhm.
It turned a mirror on the American public. And this was like we talked about eyes to see and ears to hear. For the majority of America, this may have been something to watch and to entertain. But for many, these were political statements being put on primetime television that assisted in, fueled, and, in many ways was their way, these writers, Gene Roddenberry and Rod Serling's way, and all of their men and women that were creating alongside of them of assisting social change in America and abroad. And I think, from Star Trek's first interracial kiss to, Rod Serling and having a commentary on uh, the monsters we become. I think those are the things that they addressed in those shows that are still issues today. I mean, there's a classic Star Trek episode, right, where they pick up two guys that are the last of their race and they're at war and their planet went to war over something really silly. He's like, I'm white with a black side. And the other guy's like, I'm black with a white side. And at the end of the episode, I think Kirk sends them both down to their dead planet where nobody's alive because that's what they were fighting over. And they were chasing each other throughout the galaxy. It was like this really just dumbfounding, like they took the issue of the day and just stupefied it to like turn the mirror on America and say, this is what's happening right now. And if you don't see it, you're an idiot.
So what
And
about with the Twilight Zone? My parents told me, like when I started watching reruns of the original black and white Twilight
yeah,
Zone, my I think I remember my mom talking about she like I was like, well, have you ever watched this and everything? She's like, yeah. The episode that stuck out in her mind and that I heard her talk about several times was the one where there's a really beautiful blonde-headed young lady in her 20s, and she is what we would consider this height of beauty and pretty and all those type of things, and in a certain way, and everybody's telling her how ugly she is in the whole episode. Do you remember? Have you ever seen this one, or just one stick out for you?
yeah, that's
And
eye of the beholder, I think.
and and uh, and all of a sudden at the end, she's going to go get plastic surgery because she's so vile and ugly and just horrendous to her culture and to everyone around her in society. And they get her on the camera angle changes because they never really show who she's talking to face like their face,
Yeah.
and so the camera angle changes and everybody is looks like a pig.
Yep.
The doctors and stuff, they take off their mask and they've all got these pig noses and everything, and they're telling her how ugly she was. And so it was one of those things to make you think, right? And it's like it's all about perspective. It's all about kind
It
of
was one of the first episodes of one of the first times in any kind of mainstream way that the general public was exposed to an interesting philosophy, which is truth, right? It's
yeah,
like the truth is not necessarily objective or subjective. Truth is an absolutely made up construct based on the society in which you live, right? And if the majority, right, thinks one way or looks one way, then the aberration must not be good. And
right.
so this was one of those wild episodes. Yeah, Rod Serling was maybe one of the greatest. Yeah, if I could say if you know if they say go back in time and save one person, I might pick Rod Serling,
Interesting.
or I might stop Isaac Asimov from getting a horse transfusion and contracting AIDS. One of the two.
Okay, Rodney, step in here. Ask a few things that have been on your mind. You've been in the background there, listening to the two of us, JB and RJ, go at it. So, what you got, buddy?
I was gonna ask you, RJ, well, you mentioned tarot a few times. I did find my Masonic tarot deck. It's kind of a cheaply made deck, but it's kind of fun and interesting. Where did you learn tarot? Was that part of the
Mhm.
what your guru taught you when you were younger, or
No, so one of the first teachers I had was uh yeah, I okay, so you never want to like say people's names. But anyway, so the guy who got me involved in that was basically just said, "Hey, the kind of thing you're interested in, you should join Builders of the Adytum or BOTA." And so that's what I did. I joined BOTA, which is at the time I joined it, they weren't classified as a quote unquote religion yet. I believe they did that for tax purposes, but Builders of the Adytum or BOTA is an organization that was started by Paul Foster Case after his sort of falling out with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Mowena Mathers. Um, he he basically started, something called Tarota, which was a magazine, and then later became a study circle and became Builders of the Adytum. And part of the coursework for that, which is again, it's like 14-year coursework, which is correspondence based. Although some circles of study circles do meet and perform a specific sort of like grade system,
Okay.
but it's not performed everywhere. But anyway, heavily leans in tarot. So that's where I started studying it, and I think now I have like 100 and I don't know, like over 100 decks or something silly.
Right on. Yeah, I kind of collect the decks myself. They're kind of fun
They're
to
fun.
do.
I
Yeah.
have the one that you have. The guidebook is really interesting. It's kind of written from a standpoint of maybe South American or even European style masonry. It talks a lot about the Scottish, like the degrees when they reference the 3 degrees are very Scottish Rite themed symbolic degrees, like trial by elements and things. Uh, it's kind of cool. I like that one.
Yeah, I like the fact that the tarot deck system, when you line them up, it's the hero's journey from kind of an alchemical perspective,
It
which
is.
leads you to some of the Nietzschean philosophy of the um, the Superman or the Ubermensch that you spoke of.
Yeah.
I mean, more human than human. That's pretty much the end result of the hero's journey, I think.
Yeah, I think, when we look at Nietzschean philosophy, he gets his bad rap mostly because, y- look, when he became popular, it was for one real reason, Nazism. Hitler loved a book called A Will to Power, which was published posthumously by Nietzsche's sister. And she basically cobbled up a bunch of his notes that he told her are not important, that shouldn't be published. And after he dies, she, of course, rearranges them, adds in all of her Nazi sympathetic stuff, and publishes it. And of course, Hitler then takes will to power and he gives it out to a bunch of, his men and quotes it all the time as, the Aryan nation, the Ubermensch, and all of this nonsense. And of course, Nietzsche himself called for the death of all anti-Semites. So there's just, the bummer is that he gets his bad rap because of this, but in actuality, his personal stance was anti, you know, uh, Nazism, racial, thing. He was one of the first people who stood up for women's liberties and things. But it was not without his faults. He did. I think he resented the woman that he wanted to marry for the rest of his life. He proposed to her 3 times, and she said no each time. And he probably contracted an STD from a house of ill repute, which left untreated, left to some medical conditions that eventually caused his death. But yeah,
Right.
Nietzsche's whole thing was just. He even said like there should never be a student of me. He's like, you take what I gave you and move on, right?
Mhm.
So
Unfortunately, a lot of his stuff was taken out of context. Specifically, I would think like with the concept of God is dead, he wasn't saying that in like an atheistic term.
well, he
Like
says God is dead and we killed him,
exactly,
right?
people leave out
Yeah,
that, which is very valid, and it's due to the ignorance of mankind.
yeah, yeah. A brilliant man is many of his his guys his time thought he was also brilliant. Uh, I'm thankful for things that he wrote, like "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," and one of the key texts that I think is really important. When we talk about philosophy and when we talk about truths and masonry, is the idea of Nietzsche talks about beyond good and evil. That it feels inhuman to sort of say that there is no such thing as evil, no matter what thing you could imagine. There is no evil, there is no good. There just is. And it's kind of a give and take in the whole of humanity in like the human experience, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, entropy. But I find that his ability to take a step back and try in the most objective way possible to imagine yourself as not a human and look at everything that happens in the world as a sort of give and take, a a raising and a rebuilding, a destruction and creation all the time in perpetuity, and without distinguishing the or adding a special qualifier to the human, was really, I think, something that people did not appreciate, right? Because he's sort of diminishing the importance of humanity overall, but at the same time celebrates the fact that humanity can do better by continuing to realize they'll never be perfect. They can only be what they are and reach farther each time.
Exactly. And we're taught that quite a bit in Freemasonry through
Absolutely.
degree work and whatnot, that we're trying to obtain that perfect ashlar, but we're not really going to be that within this lifetime.
Yeah, it's a wonderful sort of exercise to think about how Freemasonry and the Nietzschean philosophy are sort of intermixed. I mean, they disagree on how to get to the point. Nietzsche basically argues for an individualization. If Jeff wants to become the Superman, the Ubermensch, he doesn't require you or me to do so. Whereas Masonry kind of encourages Jeff to come to me, to come to you, to come to his brothers, to aid in his reformation and elevation. Different modicums, but almost the same outcome.
Very true. Do you have a background in philosophy? You're quite knowledgeable with a lot of.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I went to school for philosophy and religion, so I had to study really the different philosophers and study how those philosophies influenced world religions, large and small, and it's still a great passion of mine. I love reading, uh, all things biblical, all things, um, from a lot of different points of view. Right now, it's really hot. Right now, is people love uh, kind of dismantling and really taking a better look at what the Gospels and the Old Testament say. Guys like Dan McClelland on TikTok are blowing up. I really enjoy watching his commentaries. I love, of course, reading. It's kind of interesting, right? Like philosophers, living philosophers are more difficult to come to grips with today because most of them haven't been declared a philosopher yet. They're mostly still in fledgling stages of advanced mathematics and physics. You look at guys like David Bohm, who was a physicist, uh, and helped Oppenheimer develop the bomb before being exiled to Sao Paulo, Brazil. Uh, and he later becomes this world-renowned philosopher who worked with guys like Krishnamurti from the Theosophical Society. So it's kind of like living philosophers are hard to come by, but I'm pretty good with most of the dead ones.
No, that's good. Um, do you see like well, do you have a recommendation that, let's say, a new candidate comes into Freemasonry? Would you recommend they have like a background in philosophy or other various types of education, even going into maybe a starting point with esoterics before they join?
That's a great question, man. I mean, at a point in my life, I think I would have said, yeah, absolutely. Like if you don't have a foundation or at least a cursory understanding of symbology or the concept of an allegory where I tell you a story and you actually get the lesson, not just the surface level entertainment, I would tell you to just go away. Like, don't join. This isn't for you. Today, I think we have a duty to sort of foster those types of subjects and interests in Masons, regardless of whether or not they come into the fraternity with those interests. I mean, Rodney, if you were just some layman who wanted to join a lodge because you missed camaraderie and you were in the military, that's a very common story. I mean, that's a lot of bros. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And also, if the lodge can serve as a repository of information and maybe add some kindling to a fire that we don't even know exists within you, and it turns you on, and all of a sudden you dive into something that was interesting to you, that's what's really important to me. Is, are you teachable? Are you open to new ideas? Are you like ready to experience something that you've not experienced before, or that you maybe have not been willing to experience before? I think being open to those things is probably the most important. I don't necessarily think like, hey, if somebody comes to my lodge and doesn't know Plato's Republic, or doesn't know, Socrates or Aristotle and their arguments on quantifying matter, like, I don't care. Like, that's not something I'm going to fault anybody or kick them out over. I'm really more concerned with social ideologies coming into my lodge than a lack of a understand understanding of philosophy.
I would say my living philosophers that I think highly of are the songwriters, the singer songwriters. I mean, I think there's a lot of philosophy in. I could go into endless, just different types of music, even, and those guys are bringing out things, and you're just like, you listen to that lyric and you listen to that or that verse or whatever, and you're just like, wow, that like, wow, that gave me something to think about, and that almost, that's like, if I kind of contemplate upon that, it probably even changed my heart and my outlook.
Oh
It
yeah.
could be a change in me today, starting today.
There's some songs that I really enjoy that are some of my favorites that have been life-changing, and I can definitely consider them philosophical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I automatically kind of went to like, it's like, oh, and then I thought, oh, they did get a Nobel Prize. And then I'm going to say this separated on purpose. And then they're also a brother.
Hmm.
And then I was talking about Bob Dylan, but I'm
Hmm.
also talking about how that's not well known. So
Bob
there's that.
Dylan, brother.
What? Don't say that altogether. You got to separate that out.
Okay.
People people will lose their minds.
What what about Brian May from Queen? Would he be the
Dude,
same?
yeah.
I mean, he's an astrophil. He's got a doctorate in astrophysics. He's did he won a Nobel Prize, or has he been recognized something like
It's
that?
it's so wild to me, right? Like, you have a group like Queen, who ultimately, had they not done anything, all would have been six figures successful the rest of their lives. Like, well, what do you have to fall back on if this music thing doesn't work out? NASA sounds
Yeah,
legit. I
yeah,
wish.
and probably even Freddie Mercury, something in fashion or design. Like he'd have had something so creative. He'd
He's
have
on
been somewhere doing
Iconoclast.
something
Yeah.
musically or kind of visually
Yeah,
artistic. So
I agree.
and that's one of the things I try to talk about. And the Doors, even. I mean, they were all brilliant academically, and not. I mean, and I think, and I'm sure if we, and I've kind of delved into a lot of the background, and that's what I wanted to bring out in Pen and Compass. It's like, okay, you've got this thing going on, you're producing this, whether it's as internationally recognized as you, RJ, or it's going to be some of our other guys that are right down the street from me, that in my same Royal Arch chapter, that unless you came to Arlington, Texas on the right Monday night of the month you'd never cross paths with. And so I
Right.
want to, and I think, that's what we're really trying to take our megaphone and
I
get this
love it.
out to the world.
I love it because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but man, you say you won't do it, but we do it. We judge a book by its cover sometimes. I have been at lodges and listened to somebody do a presentation and thoroughly enjoyed it, and looked across the room at some curmudgeon, like just waiting, like can't, like what I envision is this guy is just like in the ninth level of hell listening to this gobbledygook, right? That's what I'm thinking. And then Q&A comes and the guy stands up and he starts talking about like the keys of music through color and the rainbow bridge, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I need that guy's phone number. You know what I mean? Like,
Can you be my friend on Facebook?
yeah, like
Can we connect
I
on
need you.
here's my phone. Can you type
Yeah, I
find your
need you in my
profile on
life.
Facebook?
Yeah.
That education
And
like extracted something from that guy that you didn't expect.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like those guys don't make the circles. But the point is like they are these like wisdom keepers hidden in plain sight. And if you give them like something to latch onto, all of a sudden they just light their lamp. And then everybody all of a sudden is like a moth to the flame, like, oh man, we had no idea we had this you know, hit a gem in the rough or whatever.
Subject matter expert.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what we. I think there's on both sides. I think there some of us that are trying to be all that in a bag of chips. Sometimes in our growth, as we had this desire, we saw the world a certain way. You said a lot of things that are very Jeff Bennett. You know, in his 20s, Jeff Bennett in his 30s, Jeff Bennett in his 40s, and now I'm in my 50s, and I'm like, and literally in the last 5 years, I have met a wider group of people, more diverse, even within the state of Texas, and I've shut up long enough to let them say something brilliant in my presence.
Yeah. Isn't it weird too? Like, as we get older, the, and this is a lesson, I think, for perhaps some of our younger brothers, whether that means younger Masonically or younger. Um, there is something so, and maybe this is generational, maybe this doesn't affect you like it affects us or is this life changing, but there's something so special and so free and even wise about being able to say, I don't know. Like some dude might just come up to you and ask you some awesome question, and you might want to give him an answer because maybe you've got some thoughts on this. But then you could say, well, I don't know. I've often thought this. What do you think? You know, there's this freedom that comes from saying that. As I think I've gotten older, it's just been like just so like weight off my shoulders to be able to, like, it's okay to just say I don't know. Like we don't have to be, like you said, all that in a bag of chips, right? So uh
Yeah,
like take
yeah.
it for what it's worth. Like and like, yeah, if you feel like you're the smartest dude in the room, move to a different room. Learn something.
Or try to. I jokingly talk about my um, getting more in depth with the study of the royal arch, the the tabernacle system, the story of Zerubbabel, the all the symbolism that goes along with that. And people will come up to me when I do those presentations and they'll say something like, "Man, I, like you made me think about things," and I'm not saying this in a braggadocious way. These are, and I'm like, well, here's my thing. I want to get, especially within a certain, you said kind of circle, and we talked about tribes. I want to build up this kind of group of guys that enjoy the same type of ritual I do, in the same type of group in Freemasonry, that I can have intelligent conversations that make me go, wow, I wish I didn't have to go to bed tonight or for the next week. And we could just sit here kind of on that like utopian plane that we were kind of talking about earlier and just be like, let's just keep this going. Like this energy is amazing, this vibrations, and I'm just like consumed by it. And it's addictive. So
Yeah, I agree. Been, many a night, whether that's around a table after lodge or sitting on the back end of a truck, that's when we're getting the work done a lot of times, and I love it.
hey Rodney, I don't want to. I know. We're about to wrap this episode up. You had some questions I know related to your other project that you've been doing for a decade, something like your Ancient Mysteries Revisited. I wanted you and RJ maybe to have a quick interchange on that, and so you want to describe that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I have a ongoing radio show myself on FM radio in Fort Wayne, Indiana called Ancient Mysteries Revisited, and it's also streamed on WELTFM.com. It's something I started back in, I think, around 2016. There's a fellow guy in Fort Wayne that was interested in like archaeology, ancient history, and whatnot, and he goes by Indiana Bruce Cunningham. Um, so with that in mind, you had interest in that realm when you were young. Did that interest build as you got older? And are you interested in certain aspects of that realm of ancient history?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm in love with the idea of mystery schools and mystery rites. From today, we can look at what we know of them, rites of passage that still exist in countries that I think westernized might consider uncivilized, but are civilized uh, in their own ways of looking at things. And I think when we look, in the ancient past, right, like the ancient Near East, for instance, we see a lot of rites of passage and things that have happened that we know existed through the writers, the historians of their day, but we don't necessarily have anything to go on other than knowing that those things happened and have found archaeological evidence of those things, whether that's um, Mithras cults or Eleusis or cults of Dionysus or any of those sort of rites of passage that effectually might be doing the same thing. Well, I would argue that we're trying to do what they did, albeit within the like you're bowling, right? And we've got the bumpers up, and the bumpers keep us from like ingesting hallucinogenic drugs before we do a degree. Um, but to that effect, I mean, I think that the purpose of those particular degrees or rights definitely serve a purpose that is not dissimilar from what we hope to achieve in masonry. So I think definitely still have a, sweet spot in my heart for all things ancient mysteries and ancient cults.
Right on. Yeah, I've always had a passion for it myself. I grew up like listening to Coast AM with Art Bell, and that was kind
Oh, yeah, right. My man. All right. Yeah, Art Bell is he's a wild one, man. Like I think he was the first one that broke the John Titor story. Um
of, I think you're
the
right.
Yeah, yeah. It was like, so anybody who's listening, sorry, John Titor, whatever you want to call it, just look up the history of it. It's pretty wild. Time traveler. Uh yeah. Well, time traveler slash dimensional traveler. I can't remember. Anyway, go check it out. It's a rabbit hole. But yeah, loved Art Bell. Love all things Art Bell, and as you probably see back there, X Files and UFOs.
I was
Yeah,
going to mention I love that X-Files poster.
yeah. One of my favorites. A good brother, friend of mine, Darren Laners, who runs Meat Act Part podcast, does another podcast with me called Beyond the Fourth Veil, which is a York Wright homage there, Jeff. But Beyond the Fourth Veil is just like all things paranormal, and yeah, we've talked about UFO disclosure statements and and Betty and Barney Hill abductions and Travis Walt. I mean, we cryptids, all that kind of stuff. So it's super Art Bell inspired, but it's fun.
With all that in mind, too, Jeff, when you stepped away for a little bit, I was telling RJ that I've been to the Gold Pyramid House multiple times up in Chicago that he mentioned earlier in this episode. Um, and I was telling him that I know the person that's in charge of putting on those pyramid conferences, and I had the idea of maybe in the near future, in a few years, maybe all of us can hold an esoteric Mason conference up there at the Gold Pyramid House.
We could just move the San Antonio Esoteric Summit to up the same time zone on the other end of the
Yeah, there
U.S.
you go. Just move it over.
I've been yeah, we should do something like that. Just find the right date, get everybody there,
Get a little
plan it out
retreat.
far enough ahead. So, do you have anything else, Rodney?
Mhm. Pretty much wrapped it up. You guys went over quite a bit of topics.
Yeah. Great episode, RJ. And as I told you, but when we were kind of warming up tonight before we started recording, this episode has been in the honor and memory of my good buddy, my uncle companion is what I always called him, companion uncle Barry. As he's known in the state of Texas, he was 50-year plus Mason, and he just passed away on us not too long ago, 79 years of age. And just it was my privilege to be loved on by him and just to be around him for 25 years. And it wouldn't have happened if we both hadn't been Freemasons and kind of done things in the York Rite in Texas. And we were in 3 different invitational bodies also together. So those were extra Saturdays that we got to do things and fun stuff like I got to initiate him into the Grand Architect's degree at the statewide AMD Allied Masonic degree, and then he and I worked whenever my first cousin came through and got to work in things like that. And then a very special time here in the last couple of years was when Kadeem Lowe was joining the Royal Arch chapter. The 3 of us worked in his past master's degree down in Stephenville, Texas. And so very special guy, Barry Dean Brunk Sr. And so tonight I wore a special T-shirt in his honor. It's SFA Lumberjacks, where he and I both graduated from college, and wearing the purple to remember him. Axum Jacks. Love you, Uncle Barry. Love you, dude. Missed you. So with that, RJ, man, great discussion. We could have gone on for. We'll have you back, and I do want to have you talk about music. We kind of delved into that tonight. In Masons Who Love Music, we've got a different co-host. Rodney's going to be doing the production work, but I got a different co-host, and when it's time, I'll reveal that. But little teaser there. We always want to remind people that right now we're on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel for Pen and Compass. And we'd love for you to go out and subscribe to that. And we'd also like for you to like every episode, whether you don't really like it or not, But we'd love to get out there and just think about, maybe it wasn't your favorite episode that you'd seen, but man, hitting like on every one of those helps tell YouTube that people enjoy the podcast and help to grow it. So you definitely understand that, RJ, on the backside of algorithms and things like that.
Absolutely. Every little bit helps. So as the youngins say, smash that subscribe button.
So
Turn on your little switch to get notifications when new episodes come out.
what would you like to highlight as we've talked about some of your projects and things? What would you like?
I would just invite anybody who's not listened to WCY to check out WCYpodcast.com. It's our Masonic podcast of about 663 episodes, I think. We do every Sunday, except last couple of weeks I've just been running against the wall with stuff, so a little bit delayed, but they do come out. I usually take a break every single year, but not this year. So I'm just gonna keep producing content until through January. So there's that. Secondly, if you need a speaker in your area, go to MasonicConstruction.com. This is a cool little website. You'll find Jeff on there. You'll find Rodney on there. You'll find myself and a bunch of other guys globally. It'll tell you how to get in touch with them. Any one of them, you can search by topic, you can search by keyword, you can just directly pick a speaker. And then when you send them a little message, it goes straight to them. It doesn't go through me or anybody else. They get the direct message, and you can work with them to have them come out and do a little something for you. If you need some education at your lodge, some inspiration, or maybe heck, you just want to talk to Jeff about whatever he's got listed on his prepared topics. So check that out. And then lastly, I would just throw a shout out to the Midwest Conference on Masonic Education, which will be held in Indianapolis, Indiana, May 2nd through the 4th, 2025, which I'm very happy and proud to say I'm an organizational member of the Midwest Conference, but my member jurisdiction is Illinois. So the Midwest Conference is represented by a number of different states. Most recently, Texas. Texas has joined the Midwest Conference on Masonic Education. Indiana is a member, so I'm hoping to see Rodney there. In May. I'm hoping to see Jeff if you can make it up there. But yeah,
Probably like 2026 because I've got 2 graduations happening on a high school niece,
those sweat.
and so this I may not be this year, and I need to. We're everybody we're actually recording this December 2024, so that's why we're looking out 6 months. But I already know my calendar's pretty jam packed. Can't hop on and I'd have to hop on a plane. It's a long drive up there.
I'll just say that the Midwest Conference of Masonic Education is the longest running educational conference for Masonic education in the United States. So you can check it out, mcme1949.org. There'll be tickets going on sale, I think in January, maybe a little bit before. And I know they have great speakers lined up. I'm just not allowed to say who they are yet. I'm not one of them. They're really cool people, though. Yeah. I promise.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Great episode. RJ Johnson, Whence Came You? Thank you so much. And we'll catch you next time, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it and had as much fun listening to this as we have sending this your way. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Keep seeking more lights.